Erik Iverson, former chair of the Montana GOP, also former chief of staff to Congressman Denny Rehberg, and now heads up More Information. And they're not just a highly sought-after polling firm here in Montana. They're doing work all across the country. Erik, great to have you back with us on the show.
Morning, Aaron. Great to be back.
Yeah.
Always good to hear your voice.
Yeah, good to hear yours as well. Well, I want to talk Super Tuesday with you here in a second and some of the work you guys were doing.
Yeah,
but first, What do you think about this news that Bullock appears to be about ready to jump into the Senate race?
Well, I'm not surprised at all. I was of the opinion all along that this is what he'd end up doing. I mean, if you think about it, he's only ever been a politician. The guy's been running for office since, the late 90s when he tried to take out, Mike McGrath for attorney general and lost in that primary, then ran a big labor union ballot initiative in Montana and never stopped running for office. So this is his entire identity as a person, is being a politician, being an elected official. And so none of this really surprised me, given that there was nothing else that really he wants to do other than just be an elected official. And I think that your last caller was correct in pointing out that, this is a guy who, who inherited, being, with adage being born on third base, and he couldn't get to home plate. I mean, he inherited, and whether you credit Judy Marks or Brian Schweitzer for the largesse, it was largesse nonetheless. And he inherited it and he squandered it. But that's kind of what politicians do. And so I'm not surprised that he just kind of wants to roll from one public office to the next. No private sector experience. And his financial management of the state is pretty suspect. So I think it's going to be obviously top tier race. This goes from a pretty secure Daines reelection to, what's going to be a closely watched and highly competitive Senate race.
I've heard maybe $100 million race. What numbers are you hearing or anticipating?
Those numbers it seems crazy, right?
Yeah.
But you could see it. I mean, you're talking about control of the U.S. Senate now pretty much runs through the state of Montana. And we have seen this, really since 2012, almost every year. Montana has kind of been at the forefront, whether it was that, the Rehberg-Tester race in 12, Gianforte running for governor in 16, and Rosendale running for the Senate, Daines running against sitting Senator John Walsh. Every year we've had these big elections. Greg Gianforte winning a special election runoff against Rob Quist. I mean, these were all kind of every election sort of broke the previous election spending record. So it wouldn't surprise me. Chuck Schumer is, as you could see, this week, his agenda attacking Supreme Court justices by name. So I think that Montana Republicans shouldn't take anything for granted here. If this is a guy willing to attack a Supreme Court justice by name on the steps of the United States Supreme Court, threaten them, you can darn sure bet he's going to do and say and spend anything to get his man, Steve Bullock, elected to the United States Senate.
Well, and it makes you wonder what threats he made behind closed doors. If he'd do that on the doorstep of the Supreme Court, what did he do behind closed doors with Steve Bullock?
Exactly.
My take on this, at least my initial thought, is that if Steve Bullock jumps into the Senate race, he's still likely to lose, and it makes it harder for every other statewide Democrat to get elected because he'll suck all the oxygen out of all those other races. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I think there is that potential. On the flip side, though, I mean, what a big race like that does for Democrats is it's going to bring in tremendous financial resources to the state Democrat Party. It's also going to bring in a well-financed, well-organized, and probably pretty well-run ground operation that likely would not have been in place but for a big Senate election. So, yeah, you take the trade-off as a down-ballot candidate. Gee, how are my ads going to get seen under the weight of all this Senate advertising? How am I going to get oxygen at the various, events around the state? The plus side is you're going to benefit from an enhanced and probably pretty big Democrat turnout operation. So it's always kind of you take a good with a bad if you're a down ballot candidate in this type of scenario.
There's a Montana connection to this big upset victory in the Alabama GOP Senate primary. I'll tell you about that here as we chat with Erik Iverson, former chair of the Montana GOP and, of course, head of More Information, prominent polling firm here in Montana and doing work all across the country. I do want to sneak in a quick phone call here, though, from Robert in Columbia Falls. Robert, always good to hear from you. So what's your take on this whole Bullock Senate story?
Oh, well, like a former caller said, not wanting to announce or putting it off or whatever, we've all heard that done many times. Bullock is maybe a little more staunch in it in what he said, but what amazes me is that, I know I've heard you say he lied when he said this or that. Now you're saying you don't really believe that, but the point is, you got the liar in chief in Washington, that lied for 7-8 years about Obama being born in Kenya and not being an American, and an illegal president and whatnot. And when he won the election, he just flipped 180. He said, well, no, he actually was. To think that people won't concentrate on his lies come November, you've got to be smoking something special.
And I'll bet you'll want to legalize that this November too. Robert, good to hear from you. Sorry to cut a little bit short, but we are short on time. You know what? Hey, at the end of the day, Trump's delivering. And so that's the difference here. Bullock's gone very far to the left. I think that's what's going to hurt him in this race. But either way, short on time. Erik Iverson, first off, your take on Robert's call.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, President Trump's going to run on the economy. He's going to run on accomplishments. Only the hardcore, left-wing Democrats are going to concentrate on the type of stuff that, Robert was talking about birther stuff and things like that. That's not what most people are focused on. Most people are focused on their pocketbook. And at the end of the day, voters mostly vote their pocketbook. And right now, with the economy humming along, regulations being cut, taxes being cut, record job growth, low unemployment, it's a pretty darn good record to run on.
Talk about Alabama, because you're not only a prominent pollster here in Montana, but you do polling for candidates all across the country. Super Tuesday, Alabama. Most conventional wisdom would say, hey, former Attorney General, former Senator Jeff Sessions should be able to pull away an easy victory just because he was a senator for so long. You helped the team pull off a massive upset there in Alabama.
We did, and I did the polling and do the polling for former Auburn head football coach Tommy Tuberville, and we pulled off the election night upset. Now the way it works in Alabama is, in the primary, if nobody gets 50%, then the top two move to a runoff. We were certain we were going to be in the top two to make that runoff. We knew it was real close as to where we were going to take the first spot in the runoff for the second. We actually edged out Jeff Sessions by almost 2 percentage points. And I think really it's a testament to what happens when you cut and run, you turn your back on President Trump the way Jeff Sessions did. Alabama voters are holding him accountable, and I mean, it's really true. And Coach Tuberville said it all along throughout the race. He said, "Look, people in Alabama trust football coaches more than they trust politicians," and that turned out to be true. So now we're in a runoff with Jeff Sessions, and of course he's got all sorts of. He's got $2 million that he rolled over from his old Senate account, and so he's got all the swamp money, all that insider DC establishment money that they're going to try and start throwing at us. But what we have is a solid record, standing with President Trump, and solid record is just winning as a football coach and being a solid conservative and a Christian conservative. And I like our chances. I like our chances to elect the next U.S. senator in Alabama. And interestingly, Coach Tuberville has a Montana connection. When he was head coach at Arkansas State, he brought his team up in 1984 to play the Bobcats in Bozeman in the middle of a harsh winter. And he talks about going into Brick Breeden Fieldhouse there to get dressed out. And just the night before, they'd had the college finals rodeo there, and so there were still about 4 feet of cow manure and dirt on the floor of the Brick Breeden Fieldhouse. And he says, Eric, because I'll never forget that smell. He goes, there was 4 feet of cow manure inside Brick Breeden Field House, and then we went outside to play the Bobcats, and the ground was frozen 4 feet deep. And he goes, and they kicked our butts.
Yeah, scared the other stuff right out of them. Yeah, that's a great story. Thanks for sharing that one, especially for our listeners in Bozeman. I know we got a lot of other Bobcats across the state, but and Grizz fans too. I got to add that. Less than a minute to go here. Does this also tell you, Erik Iverson, with more information? Does this also tell you how volatile these elections are right now? That people aren't just going with the status quo and the same old politics.
That's right. And, we in Alabama, I mean, we have grabbed that outsider mantle, that drain the swamp mantle that President Trump ran on, and that, I really believe, is where the heart and soul of this party is and should be. That populist message of doing the people's work instead of the work for the politicians in the swamp really played out well in Alabama. And I think that that's a winning message for Republicans across the country. I mean, we got to stick to the basic. It's economic. It's stop that revolving door in Congress where members of Congress become lobbyists. You got to drain the swamp. And at the end of the day, have the backbone to stick with President Trump when the chips are down. And that was really Jeff Sessions' biggest failure.
All right. Well, interesting.
When President needed him, he wasn't there.
And that runoff is March 31st, so you got another election right around the corner. So, Erik Iverson, greatly appreciate your valuable time. Thanks for being with us.
All right. Thanks, Aaron.